Good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting at 5:30 p.m. We will begin our meeting with a call to order and with introductions around the table. Beginning over here.
Jim Lothridge.
Diane Potter.
Tony B.
Becky Fless. No more. Administrative staff.
Ken Hopkins, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Garrison, Principal of Gardner Regional Middle School.
Patricia Morris, Director of Special Services.
Karen Moody, Principal of Warren Richard School.
Vicki Duguay, Principal of Riverview Community School.
Katie Gould, Principal at Helen Thompson School.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum.
Dave Dowsty, Director of Operations.
Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. So tonight, the only thing on the agenda is to discuss the 2022-2023 requested budget and to look at all the work that's been done in the last week.
Sure. So I'll start this off if that's okay, and then I'll shift us eventually to Andrea, who will talk about the impact of some of the reductions. So at the last Finance Committee meeting last week, the direction back to the administrative team was to bring in a budget that had an impact to taxpayers no greater than 6%. Really try to get between 5 and 6%. And that's what we have done. As I mentioned before, we don't have a lot of wiggle room in our budget. It's pretty tight. There's not a lot of places to go. But if Andrea, would you bring up?
Will you please allow me to present? Thank you.
Kind of bring up the document that I shared last week that talked about, that showed and outlined all of the cuts. And I will remind you of what we did last week, what we've done this week, and then what options still exist for additional reductions. So as soon as we can get that up for public to see.
Says it's disabled. Oh, gotcha.
All right. So I refigured this a little bit from what you saw last week. So I stuck with the same preliminary budget number that you saw on March 22nd. I didn't want to keep moving that around. So that was a stable number that I stayed with. At the top of this document,
Sorry. I'm struggling.
that's okay. So at the top of this document, you'll see that I have cuts already made from the proposed budget. So in the first section, where it says least impactful reductions cut March 29th, you saw those from the last meeting. Since the last meeting, you will see that some additional reductions have already occurred to the budget. Andrea went into the budget and has reduced those. Don't go that far, please. Come back down, Andrea.
Sure.
Right there.
Okay.
So where it says additional least impactful reductions cut 4/522. So we've had some reassignments of staff. Some staff have left, other staff members have maybe shifted in, and we've done some movement. As a result of reassignments and transfers, we're able to save $26,291. We've also had other various salary adjustments. And again, that can be because someone has resigned, we haven't filled the position, that could have been an experienced person. Now we budget in the middle of the road versus the top end. We've had some contracts that it looks like they're settling, so we have a little bit of savings there. General liability insurance savings. Andrea has gone back in and looked at the board's general liability. We don't have an exact cost yet. We're still waiting. But based upon her investigation, what she's hearing, what she sees, she felt that she could reduce that line by $9,600. The middle school went back in, they've reduced some supplies. Pittston Randolph has gone in, they reduced some supplies. We also have various software that we began purchasing as a result of us going remote. Staff have gotten used to, liked a lot of those software. Terry and Angela have been reaching out to our staff to find out which ones are we using most predominantly, and those that we're not, we'll just reduce them. So through that work, they are recommending a $14,500 reduction to software. So Andrea has already made these reductions in the budget of $78,000 above and beyond what you saw last week. So the least impactful, we've reduced $473,000. So last week, we discussed some other possible reductions, but these have not been taken out of the budget because a lot of these really require board action on some of them. And so we talked about the academic tutorial position. We talked about the elementary assistant principal position, the vacant middle school PE teacher position that would leave us with one PE. We talked about the playground for pre-K. We talked about some other enrollment software that we would eliminate, baseball uniforms, eliminating JV hockey for boys, JV golf, freshman basketball for girls, and freshman basketball for boys. So that was a proposed reduction of 172,000 plus. So if you look on the back side, here are the additional reductions that we're recommending that would bring us in line with what you are seeking. So we currently have 2 elementary school counselor positions. One position is vacant because the person is retiring. So the plan is to eliminate both elementary school counselor positions, but that the second position would be filled by a social worker. And that would provide each of our elementary buildings with one full-time social worker for the 22-23 school year. In the 23-24 school year, that would give us only 3 social workers because one of our social workers is currently covered with federal dollars. So if you wanted that to stay, you would need to build it into a future budget. So I want to be really clear with that. And at this moment in time, with all of the issues that are being dealt with, really feel like the needs of our students are best met with a social worker and not a school counselor, although they provide great support, don't get me wrong at all. But we have a lot of SEL issues going on right now. And the last time that we advertised for a school counselor position, we had great difficulty getting people to apply. So there's just not an abundant number of people. So we're just trying to shift to social worker. It's a model that a number of elementary schools are using. Also recommend eliminating 3 special ed tech positions. Some of our special ed positions, ed tech positions, we haven't filled for the last year or 2. We just haven't been able to find them. So it is our belief at this point, since we haven't been able to fill them, that there are a reduction that can be made. High school world language teacher, as I've mentioned the last few meetings, Mr. Kempton has been working on his schedule, and based upon student signups, we believe that we can reduce the French, the capacity for French can be reduced. So we're looking at reducing a teacher to half-time in world language, and the same is true in science. And we're looking to reduce a science position at the high school to half-time. Also, we have grades 8, 9 transitions program. I think that we talked about that a little bit before, that we really aren't getting the students to sign up and participate in it as we had hoped. So that is on the table to be eliminated for 4,700. And then looking at taking our 2 assistant high school principals and the assistant director of operations. They currently work 226 days and look to reduce them to 220 days. That brings them in line with the athletic director position. And in conversations with Mr. Kempton and with Gabe, and I've spoken with the assistant principals, feel like that is doable. So that presents another 284,500 and change in reductions, or a total of possible reductions from the group from last week, this week, to $456,819.73. So questions on any of those proposals?
Where do I start?
Okay.
Okay, I've got several. Supplies for Gardner Regional Middle School and Piston Randolph Consolidated. What are we talking about? What kind of supplies? And I'd like to see what the principals could tell me.
Sure, so I can go first. So looking at the middle school, a lot of them were softwares that we had adopted for various programs during COVID that are currently no longer being used. So a majority of it came from there. Some other pieces were technology related, components for the classroom that we were able to already find within district or that Terry was able to support through her budget instead.
Okay,
So it wasn't actually
it
classroom
was
supplies.
softwares, it wasn't true
Correct.
supplies as far as I'm.
Correct,
looking.
right? It wasn't like pencils and markers
No,
and those things. Yeah, it was actually bigger ticket items that we're not using that we were
Okay.
able to pull back from.
I don't. see
And I don't
Christine.
see, Christina, I'm not sure, you saw that list. Do you remember?
Yep, there were a few big ticket items like bookcases. There were some teachers who had rather large supplies lists. She asked them to trim those lists down. It's just, it's various, but it's not, it wasn't books or.
Okay, I don't want to see teachers spending their own money
I
to
agree.
buy supplies. That's a real no starter for me. I mean, if they're truly have got extra stuff that they can do without, I'm fine, but I sure don't want to be dipping into their pocketbook to buy supplies.
It wasn't, oops, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It wasn't classroom supplies.
Okay,
And Jim, just to assure you, that has been my conversation. We have discussed that at I believe the administrative team. And it is not my desire in any shape or form to be asking teachers to be buying their own supplies. I don't think that that's right. But we have talked about what is the right number. Okay, what is that correct number that should be allotted to classrooms so that it's enough to meet their needs, but it's not so much that you buy extras of things that we don't really need. And that's hard to get at.
always have
And
a little wiggle room.
yeah, and it's hard to understand, hard to really get at. There are times when a particular teacher may need more supplies than another teacher for various reasons. But we've talked about that actually at length as an administrative team.
My next one gets up to this academic tutorial. What is that entailing? I don't remember talking about it last week, but we may have, and I apologize if we did.
Yep, that's okay. We did talk about it, but what that is, it's been around for quite some time. And the purpose was to allow you would take an academic tutorial, it's like a substitute, and that substitute would go into a classroom and cover a class so that the teacher could have a little time to work with groups of students on a particular skill. And it hasn't worked as effectively in the last few years. It has been on the chopping block a number of years, and it continues to survive. And this year, given where things stand, we had to put it on the list.
We talked about the let's see. So you talk about the middle school physical ed teacher. That's one you're talking about eliminating.
Yes.
So everything on this list is something that you're planning on that would be acceptable without major concerns to eliminate out of the budget on this second part. With greater impact.
Yes. Yeah, the elementary administrators have talked at length about the need for the social workers and the reduction in the elementary.
I am concerned about the assistant principal at Helen Thompson. We talked about that last week.
Yep.
And I think there is support on the board for that position to remain.
Well, I know that two of you indicated that you had interest, and I've discussed that behind the scenes, but it's still on there because we need to get to a certain number. And my thought, Jim, is that when the committee is at a place where it decides where to go with these proposals, that if the majority of the finance is not in support, then you would have the opportunity to say, I support everything here except that one, and see what happens.
That's the only thing on this list that I would, since what you've explained to me, is the only thing I would take issue with. So that one, and let's see, I have two more questions. And you kind of answered one of them, actually, since we have 3 special ed tech positions that we have not been able to fill. And I don't think you're going to find anybody because I know they're all working shorthanded. So, and I know the vice principals at the high school work very hard, and we've got and particularly those that are dealing with issues with behavior. It seems like we're at penny wise and a pound foolish, to be honest with you, for $7,600. I just would like to know a little more about that one issue. Other than that, those are the only things I have any major questions about. This is just a question. The other one is I am truly opposed to cutting the assistant principal at Helen Thompson, because we've got we're developing, I hope, a very good special ed program over there. And I think with the guidance and the assistants, I don't want to dump that on the rest of the staff. I really don't. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Sure, thank you, Jim. And again, as we were putting together these reductions, the ultimate goal was to stay away from the classroom and have as least amount of impact on students as possible. And so really feeling like you have to look at administration. Administration has to be part of the solution. It can't be on the backs of staff and on the backs of students. So in terms of the assistant principals and the assistant director of operations, those 6 days would occur during the summer. So students would not be in session, school would not be in session. So it's not like they wouldn't be there to deal with student issues when they surface. And so in a conversation with both Gabe and with Mr. Kempton, felt like during the summer months, they could easily absorb having 6 fewer days of these individuals at working. I don't know if either of you want to add to that.
Would you like an extra week of vacation, unpaid, obviously? Or would it be, could they do onesies, twosies, or what do you look?
They would work with Mr. Kempton and they could work 3 days a week. They could have, I mean, right now, like our elementary administrators, they're assigned to work 211 days. And so they have virtually the entire month of July off. However, I say that if there's a rainy day, they might come in. They might choose to work that day, get some paperwork done and take a Friday on in August. So all of the actual schedule would be determined by their supervisor and them. So we're
Okay.
pretty flexible during the summer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Katie? Not to put you on the spot, sorry.
There you are.
But the assistant, I'm sorry, but the assistant principal keeps coming up. Can you just talk a little bit about the roles?
Yeah, I mean, Tiffany is, a 50-50 partner. And today, for example, we had a scheduling conflict, and so we just divide and conquer IEP meetings, student needs as they come up, parent requests for communication from an administrator in the building. The other half of her position is instructional support. And that has been, what that looks like has varied this year because we really have sort of had to tackle things as they've come up and haven't landed on a consistent schedule as we want for instructional support, which would look like scheduled time supporting students across grade levels. Currently, Tiffany's facilitating PLC meetings with teachers. She is coaching, not like an instructional coach, but
PLC,
she's,
could you explain that to me?
yes, professional learning communities. And that's typically like grade level team time for planning, looking at data, grouping students. She's coaching teachers, not in the capacity of an instructional coach, but when we meet as a student support team, which is a school-wide team to address specific student needs, if there are determinations during those meetings for things like helping a teacher develop classroom management strategies, helping teachers develop individual support plans for students, that's the work that Tiffany is doing under that instructional support half of her role.
What is she doing in relationship to the new expanded special ed program that's at your school?
This year, she has been supporting, as I have, some of the behavioral needs that were unexpected this year. And so that's if we need an immediate person, just hands-on assistance, it might be stepping into the class so that the classroom teacher can help de-escalate a situation. That's what it's looked like. We haven't expanded steps to the extent that we expected to. We've had lots of meetings and considered lots of placement for a number of different students. So while the expansion piece hasn't started, just the transition alone has been a big difference in the building. I would expect that next year we've got the learning that happened from the transition this year under our belts. It's going to serve us well.
Sure.
Next year, welcoming stars into the building. And I would anticipate that the communication with families, setting the tone school-wide, welcoming students and developing some diversity and acceptance will be, a part of our work.
Will we be expanding IEP meetings where an administrator needs to be at one of those meetings? Are you gonna have the time, or is she gonna have the time?
We would split that. Sometimes we both attend.
Oh, okay.
Across the day, we've got IEP meetings, 504 meetings, student support team meetings. There's always need for an administrator at those.
Yes.
And at this time, we try to be strategic about who attends which one, depending on who spends the most face time with a kiddo, or sometimes more intensive needs I might attend because that's, I have more experience and she's still learning the role. But at this time, we can pretty equitably split our meetings.
You're comfortable with reducing that one to halftime, or is that how I'm gathering this, or?
Well, don't get me wrong. I really would love to not cut any of the things on the list.
Yeah.
Tiffany and I have talked about feeling effective this year in this partnership and hoping to get another year. We also have talked about just recognizing the student needs, the classroom needs, and sort of accepting that an administrative position is a luxury we would love to keep, but would love for the for the impact to not be felt at the classroom level.
I disagree with you that it's a luxury, frankly, but that's, I think it's a necessity. I'm still very much opposed to cutting that position. So that's about the only thing I have to take issue with. But thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the advocacy, Jim, and I agree with a lot of what you said. It's not easy.
No, not at all.
Yeah. No, just so I'm not confused, we're cutting it from full-time to half-time or just eliminating it?
The assistant principal piece is only half-time in the budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So it would depend, if the board weren't to cut it, it would depend on the person as to whether they wanted to continue working in the half-time capacity, because that still is funded federally for another year.
Which is not administrative, is that correct?
Correct, that is non-administrative, right? So the other thing, as a reminder that we're waiting for, is on Friday, we should know what our health insurance number is. And so we would love to see something less than 8%. As a reminder, each percent is worth roughly 39,000, 38,000, close to 40,000. So, all right, so if you guys are set, then
Actually, I just had my question as a member who's not on the committee, concerned about cutting the language teacher or reducing the positions in the science teacher. And I get that the schedule is sort of fitting that way. I just am mindful about what it might mean to those positions, and then that idea of either rebuilding programs. I just want to be mindful of what that impact
Yes,
is.
I'd like to know that too.
I mean, we can't talk people, right? We
Right.
can't talk people. We're only talking positions. However, I assure you that behind the scenes, Mr. Kempton and I are talking people. And want to make sure that it works for the individuals involved. Our numbers continue to decline, and I just want to make sure that we are responsive to that.
Yep.
And I mean, we talked before about making sure that if we have a class size policy in grade 4, grade 5 that allows 21, 22, 23 students, then I want to make sure that we're following a comparable, similar guidelines at the middle school and the high school. And so Mr. Kempton has done a lot of work this year in really compiling the course signups. It's really tried to make sure it's as accurate as possible and feeling like it can be done. And again, we are working with the individuals who would be impacted.
Just want to double check, right, if we, I like the process to the extent I like any of this. If it's an unfilled position, we've had challenges filling it, or somebody's retiring, that obviously makes a lot more sense to me. That,
Correct.
yep, we're backing it out now, and it shifts the workload. I do appreciate everybody's effort here and what this means. I just want to check so the school counselor backs out, we lean into the social worker a little bit. That position then goes away after a year, or that funding goes away, sorry.
That funding goes away because one position is currently federally funded.
Right, okay. So then will that leave us without, if the funding goes away, we'll then be without a social worker and a school counselor?
You would not have any school counseling positions in the elementary schools.
Yeah.
Okay, we still have two school counselors at the middle school and 2 at the high school.
Yep.
The jobs are different. They look different at the middle school and the high school. So those would remain. And we would not have federal funding to keep the 4th social worker. So you would have 3 social workers that would be shared amongst the schools, unless at that time the budget was such that you were able to add in another social worker.
All right, just want to be mindful of, as we move these, that there's a
Correct.
sunset sort of piece here.
And that's what I want to be really clear
Yeah.
about, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you're not caught off guard and surprised down the road.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any grant opportunities for social worker?
I would have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know who could look.
And our federal dollars are good until 24. So, you know, if something happens and we don't use all the money next year and we have a little left over, you know, there is the potential, maybe you could get one more year. You know, but we'll have to wait and see.
And we still do have contracted social workers in our schools, correct?
We still have Spurlink.
Which we don't pay for, but
Correct, that they're not in every building right now in the elementary schools. I don't know if we have one at the middle school, do we?
Not this year, but we already have somebody coming in next year that's
Next year.
gonna be doing her internship at the same time.
We do have someone at the high school, but they've struggled to hire. From what I understand, schools have actually been more successful in hiring them because they don't have to worry about insurance and that entire process and documenting all of the time that they spend with individual students. So that's it for questions. I'd like to, I think, turn it over to Andrea, who will walk you through the budget workshop, the budget worksheet. So you can see the implication to taxpayers, and at the last meeting, it was requested that she provide to you the effect on MSAD11 property owners. So she has that information to share with you as well.
so the first document that I'm going to share is the expenditure articles. You'll notice that this version is a little different. I hand created it because the two sections that Pat last spoke of as far as cuts have not been made to the budget. I manually went in and cut those from the spreadsheet and plotted them in the corresponding expenditure articles. So if you notice that it looks a little different, that is the reason why. But this is where we are at. The budget with those two additional cuts, or two additional bunches of cuts rather, leaves us with a budget of $28,181,540 and change, an increase of $1.3 million or 5.06%. And you will see how the expenditure articles are affected by the cuts as suggested. Questions about this?
Double check on the special ed piece, that was a higher percentage last time. That's sort of what you're talking, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we removed those three ed techs,
Oh, yeah.
and those came out of that special ed line.
Yeah.
So, whoops. The next item is the budget worksheet. I'm going to pull out this. So we are currently at a 5.61% increase to the four communities. That's a $574,913 increase overall. Any questions?
Are you able to project that?
I thought I was, hang on.
It's a little small. Sorry, folks.
You are very
I
demanding.
know, I
I'm
know.
just struggling.
Yeah. Never
Get
happy.
people watching actually want to see the numbers. I know.
Gonna do this on the
I am being
screens.
unreasonable.
I can't,
As far, it was.
I can't figure out how to move the Zoom bar so I can get to what I need. not used to this.
Okay.
That's a little bit
There
better.
we go.
Thank you, ma'am.
You are welcome. Let me see if I can bring it down to. So that is the increase that I spoke of, the 5.61% or the 574,000. Questions regarding the budget worksheet? And then the last document that spoke of earlier was the effect on taxpayers. Sorry, just making it bigger before.
That's the requested budget scenario.
So this is the effective taxpayer sheet, includes both the local budget and the adult ed budget. I know that you haven't seen it, but this is assuming that there is no increase to the local for the adult ed budget. So based on the scenario that Pat presented, plus a 0 increase in the adult ed budget, we would see the following increases for the school side. And I want to be clear, this is just the school side of the of your tax bill. So for $100,000 valuation, residents of the city of Gardner on the school side would see an increase of approximately $69.71. The town of Pittston, $78.65. The town of Randolph, $65.17. The town of West Gardner, $53.96. And you will see that there are also valuations for homes of $200,000 and $300,000. So those are included as well. Questions? Just so that people understand, the increases are based upon the increase to valuation, so or the average valuation, so that's where the numbers are coming from. And that's included in the top part of the spreadsheet.
Next meeting, we will have on the agenda a presentation of the adult ed budget and a presentation of the food service budget. So you will see those. And then it is my hope that we will come back to the items that are listed here and get a better sense of what the board or the committee will support sending to the full board for approval.
Yes, Jim.
One question, or actually a request, not a question so much. Andrea, I know you're loaded with work, and I apologize for this, but could you factor in what these numbers would change to just with putting that one assistant half principal back into the budget? I don't want you to have to go through the whole darn thing, but just give me an idea of what it would cost to put that one half position back in the budget.
If that's what the committee would like, then I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and again, on Friday, we'll know about the health insurance. So I was actually thinking already, Jim, that for the next meeting, that we would bring back to the committee, taking into account whatever health insurance is, what it would look like if it stays in, and what it would look like if it does not.
That would be wonderful.
So I will make sure.
Then I can make an informed decision.
Absolutely.
I think, so anyway, but I just think we've got an opportunity there to save ourselves a lot of money if we can develop that in-house program over there and not have to send students to placements. I think we can save the money if it's done right. Yeah, so I am a taxpayer, so I'm concerned about it, but I'd like to see what the actual ramifications are. I don't think it is that great.
Okay,
Thank
Be
you.
happy to do that.
I really appreciate that.
So that's what we have for tonight. So we've reached the recommendations. So is that kind of,
Did a good
I
job.
don't know where else to go
You did a very
unless
good
we're
job.
unpacking programs.
Now,
Did
even though I disagree with one little item, but the rest of it looks fantastic. I hate some of the cuts, but
So do
they
we.
are necessary. And and you know, I can be wrong. Never happened before, but
If you are, we'll let you know.
I know you will. I've got the phone call.
That'd be nice. I wonder about if it would be useful to the committee to look and see how our numbers have shifted, our student numbers have shifted over the last, I don't know, 5 years.
We did
And I don't
that,
wanna-
didn't
I've done that.
we? We just did it recently,
But it's so for.
Let me go back.
years, I thought.
Let me go back and look. I've done that.
Yeah,
So,
For me,
Okay.
and if it would be for anybody else useful, just to be able to juxtapose those numbers in a financial, from the financial standpoint, because
Think it's a
while
good
I know our student numbers are decreasing, at some point, we have to grapple with what that actually means.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And-
So,
and every
Pretty much.
month you receive our monthly enrollment.
yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's in your folder every
And
day.
I look at that
Yeah.
always.
So if you
yeah.
do take a real close look at it on the second page, what I'm worrying about right now is the current grade 4. Once you hit grade 4, our numbers are going down from 150 per grade level down to around 120, between 120, 125. That's a considerable drop.
That's significant.
Grade 3 is low, grade 2 bounces back up to about 140, and then it drops again. Now, that could change. You know, we may have had a number of families decide to homeschool this year, and next year they will send their children back. So that's a possibility, but when I arrived, your numbers were 170, 180, 160 pretty consistently. So we just need to be prepared to respond. Were my numbers close?
Yeah, no. Really, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that's one of my
Yeah, the
big
120.
concerns is that we,
Yep.
I don't like cuts
Those
anywhere.
are positions, frankly.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
not,
And
and that's what we don't want, but it is what, when you talk numbers dropping, it's not a matter of budgeting, it's a matter of, you can't have 10 kids in a classroom.
Correct, but
yes.
some of the challenges, you have 4 elementary buildings,
Mhm.
and you can have 3 students in this, or 5 students in this building, but 1 in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, you know,
Mhm.
whatever. And so it's not as simple as just saying we're losing 20 students, we get to lose a teacher. It doesn't work that way.
That we had, what was going on at, in Randolph. the,
TC
Hamlin,
Hamlin, right?
Hamlin, I can never remember that name,
Mhm.
but you know, it was 70 kids running a whole school for 70 children. My God, that was what it was turn of the century in some cases.
But it took 15 years to get there for that decision to get landed on. I mean, we visited that nearly the entire time I've been on the board.
We have also reached the point where there's very little fluff in our buildings or in our district. And we can't get the types of cuts that were being requested on pens, pencils, and erasers. It has to be staff. And there isn't much else at this point. So it's. And I think Becky's idea to discuss enrollment's great. It'll remind the general public that we are funded by the state by student, per student. So as our enrollment continues to drop, so does our state subsidy. The 2 things that drive subsidy, again, are enrollment and valuation. So it will be a good reminder.
I just want to keep it on the
Radar.
radar that
Yep.
that's how we get here.
It's our conversations.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I know I may be on the wrong end of the issue because I really don't want to cut the assistant principal half-time. But at the same breath, I know that we're eventually going to be looking at positions. I like the fact that we are developing a program that I think will save us money in the very short term, frankly. I may be wrong, but that's
No, and
my hope.
And I hear you. I'm the one who advocated for that assistant principal position. And so I'm certainly not wanting to see it cut. However, I'm also not wanting to impact programs that will have to be impacted if we need to go lower in this budget. So. Awesome. Are we good?
I think we're good. So next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, adult ed, food service, and then we'll talk more about this.
Are we gonna meet on the following week? When the kids are, we will not.
I won't be here.
I won't be here unless you want to meet without me.
I won't be here.
We are also approaching the time when the budget needs to be set so that we can
Correct.
send the newsletter
Yeah.
to the printer and deliver the
Yes.
warrants. So we need to be, not
Wrapping
that I'm
this up
trying to
soon.
hurry your.
No, that's
but,
fine.
There are deadlines if we're
Well,
going
there's
to
time.
hold a
Gotta say so.
referendum in June. So, yes.
When do, we
So-
will be voting on the whole budget as the whole board here fairly soon, then.
Yes.
At the May meeting.
May meeting? Okay.
So would you send a reminder maybe to the full board that this process is wrapping up? And it's really important that all the board members are aware of decisions being made so that they have a voice, a say. And if they aren't able to be here because some it conflicts with their schedule, to make sure that they watch the live stream. So
And if they have
and if
questions
they have
to
questions,
actually
they need
watch
to let
the.
us know in
Yeah.
advance
Yeah.
versus letting us know on the night that the board is scheduled to vote on it.
I will do that.
Awesome, thank
I will
you.
send more than one.
Great.
I will post.
So we're good.
We are then adjourned
Thank you very
at
much.
6.
Well, I have 6:23.
Yes.
Yep,
Has to be a.
awesome, thank you.
I don't see that email from
I know.
Just looking at my,
Yeah, I'm with you.
Thank you.
I'll say the 11th folder, but also my.
But it's a good, we seem to have to start at very.
Right.
And if-